We will take roll. Anaskevich.
Here.
Richards. Here. Castle.
Here.
Boyd here. Okay. So we can't approve last week's minutes because we don't have a quorum. We would need 3 more to come, or 2 more, I'm sorry.
2 more. Actually, 1 more.
No.
A
we got
quorum is
9.
5.
Yeah, a quorum is 5. So this is 4, yeah, 5. So we don't have any public comment. We,
Yeah, Gippin.
yeah, he is supposed to be here, but he might be still meeting with the law department. He never said he wasn't coming.
He's meeting with them by himself?
Yeah, because it was his committee. It was his,
Governance.
yes. We have no independent police auditor, so we'll move forward. And we'll go into our human resources subcommittee report out.
I did not have a subcommittee this week because of the, it is that the potential interviews. We had 5 interviews scheduled and only 1 appeared. We very much like this gentleman. Phil is going to have another follow-up conversation with him tomorrow over a couple of things that Stacy and I wanted him to talk to him about, and he wanted to talk to him about. And if those follow through, we'll probably recommend him to be hired.
Okay.
But if not, then we will start at the beginning. And it's unfortunately, what I found is a really steep funnel of people who are interested, people who respond, people who show up.
Mm-hmm.
It's really slow. So that's what
How many people did we interview by chance?
1.
Okay. Any further questions or comments?
No, I don't have any about that.
I just have kind of an idea. So I know we've been, as a board, going out to more community engagement, and this kind of aligns with the community engagement subcommittee, but I'm wondering if we don't recommend this candidate for hire, if that might be something the community engagement and HR can collaborate on, and maybe we can take the job description and that process to some of these community engagement just to get the word out. So I'm wondering if that could be a great collaborative opportunity as well, if need be.
I like the idea.
The idea in general is good, but you have to go through so many steps even to be able to be interviewed. So that very much makes that process much longer. She does have more, there seems to be always a pool of people who want to be interviewed for one position, so we just have to tell her this time she'll send out the paper to do that. But yeah, in general, I think that's a good idea. I had no idea how it was as complex as it is.
Okay. That's good. There's no further questions. We'll go on. Would you, Ms. Castle, would you be able to give us a community engagement report out?
Yeah, so we did not have a subcommittee meeting this week, but I did attend that event that I shared last week at Bookdale CLC on Friday, and it was a wonderful event. We had about 150 in attendance with APD, community members. We had some of our youth there from Akron Public Schools, so it was a great opportunity and some really productive conversations about the verdict and different concerns in the community. Right now, I think we're still kind of refining as a committee what our description and functions are. So that's kind of our update at this point.
Awesome.
And then I do have another event that I was going to share with Ms. Lewis, and just wanted to share with the board. So this Saturday at Higher CLC is the Hoop for Coop event. It's a wonderful event where they are offering free sports physicals, preventative health screenings, and they have a basketball tip-off. That's going to be from 11 to 7 with the first game at noon at Higher CLC. I thought that might be a great opportunity for the board members to get out there in the community and kind of introduce ourselves, connect with some of the citizens, as well as just kind of share some information that we've gathered along the way. I know last meeting we talked about kind of creating a document about the complaint process and having that flyer to share, so I thought that might be a great way if we could connect with Mr. Moss as a board, potentially as the community engagement subcommittee, and maybe get connected with that event.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea as far as us going to things like this and having like a table set up to where we can have information regarding our board and any type of information that we can offer. I think too, from a community engagement subcommittee, we have to look at how do we begin to, I think, offer and even survey some of our community members, if possible, you know, to really leverage our community engagement from an educational perspective, but also from a data collecting perspective, I think is going to be helpful. So I agree. I know we're not going to have time necessarily to get a skirt made for a table, but I think this may be something, Mr. Costa, that we'll probably have to see you about as far as getting approval to purchase. It's just a skirt when we want to go out to some of these community events like this and set up a table. That way we have information, so that way we're presenting ourselves well, and hopefully, you know, this week we'll be able to send an email a possible logo for us, so that way everybody can kind of see it, tell me what you don't like, and we can make tweaks as we go on. So, Ms. Castle, would anybody from the subcommittee be able to kind of man a table? Because I can give you Mr. Moss's number if you want to contact him.
Yeah, I actually have it right here, so I was going to
Cool.
share and connect with Ms. Lewis. I'm happy to do it, but I wanted to run it by her as the
Okay.
chair of the subcommittee first, but I'm happy to be there, and anybody else who'd like to join. So I'll connect with Ms. Lewis, and if she wanted to take the lead, but if not, I'm happy to as well.
Okay. I'm going to go back to, do we want to think about any type of a, you know, we may want to think about any type of a survey. It might be too short notice for this week, even when it comes to some of the complaints and the process, and if people know that they can actually file a complaint against the police. I'm just, you know, as we continue to hear numbers about what hasn't happened, my question becomes, do people know that they actually can, right? And if they don't, we need to be collecting data that shows that, because that becomes a part of how we can help to educate our community on not just filing a complaint, but also once that happens, what does the flow look like after it goes in? So hopefully we can help to establish and build some trust. So just want to make that comment. Now, in order to move forward, I want to go back because we need to get our minutes approved now that we have quorum from last meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
All right, I'll roll call it. Matiskevich,
Here. Oh, yes.
Gippin,
Yes.
Richards. Yes. Castle,
Yes.
Costa,
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Mr. Gibbon, did you have a report out for governance?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The Governance Committee met yesterday evening. Ms. Castle and I were able to attend, and we were very happily we were joined by Councilwoman Amobian. We did not specially reach out to her, but she, you know, we've been giving the notices to the members of council, and she came. So we, oh golly, an hour, at least an hour. You know, very useful conversation with her about her perspective on the board. I wouldn't want to try to paraphrase it, but it was obviously she's very supportive of what we're trying to do, and very, very helpful, and I think will continue to be helpful. The only, to the extent there was business, I suggested that maybe one approach to determining how the board will operate in practice, given that we know we have rules under the charter, and the rules are to provide for procedures under the charter, all of which to be approved by council, that it may be that there's another category that's more detailed about how things would be done. I don't have a good word for it, but more on the level of guidelines or something like that, that would follow from the rules and procedures, but would be not at that level and would not require council approval, and therefore would be easier for us to work with, change as need be, since we're starting up something new here. So that kind of put that concept out on the table. Katie didn't say that's a terrible idea. So that's really the extent of the business we did. The reason that Mr. Costa and I were a few minutes late, as you may have explained, Mr. Chairman, is that we were meeting with Law Director Belfance and Assistant Director Angeloni just now for, again, just over an hour. A very, very useful conversation, and at some point, I think Ms. Belfance's intention is to address the board this evening, not at great length, in open session. So whenever she's ready to do that and you think it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, that would happen. Is it appropriate to speak about the meeting we had yesterday, or were you going to do that? I wasn't strictly a governance thing.
Oh, go right ahead.
Okay. Mr. Kemp, Ms. Antashevich and I met yesterday morning into the afternoon. I think it was more or less a 2-hour meeting with representatives of the FOP at their lodge. We met with the president, Clay Cozart, the recording secretary, Marvin Murphy, and they brought their lawyer, Susanna Moskowitz, down from Cleveland for the meeting. And we really, the three of us have not really had any conversation about it. Donzella and I had a chance to speak a few minutes afterwards. But, you know, just speaking for myself and each of you as well, but I was very pleasantly surprised by the meeting. I really did not know what to expect. Thought it was conceivable that it would be not an unfriendly meeting, but one in which, you know, a fairly strong position against this board doing anything different than the auditor has done previously would be stated, and that was not at all the case. And there was quite a bit of discussion, you know, about how we might find a middle ground, as they were expressing it, you know, in terms of the scope of our authority in investigations. That was the subject. And I just was very heartened by what was said. They, you know, want to continue the discussion, which I think will be a helpful thing. They're aware of how we're approaching the subject of authority. They've seen that resolution and memorandum. And it may be that they come back with some comments before we actually act on it, but they had no comments to offer yesterday, certainly nothing negative saying, well, this is not the way to do this. So it was a very good meeting, I thought, and I don't know what each of you thought, but I really was pleased.
Yes. I thought it was a good meeting, and it was a necessary meeting because things aren't always the way they seem, if you will. And like Mr. Gippen, I wasn't expecting, it wasn't what I expected. I expected a less friendlier environment than what it actually was. And I was very pleased with that, and I think that Mr. Gippen and Mr. Boyd were too. And I think that the impression that I left with was that the FOP really does want to work with us, but they also understand that we may come to an impasse at some point down the line. And we've kind of already both said that we understand that. And if we should come to an impasse down the line, then we've already established the respect for one another, if you will, and respect for one another's roles on what we have to do for both the community and for the police department. So I think that was a good thing. I think that it was, you know, I think that their position was well thought out. I thought our position was well thought out, and there was no hostility in the air at all. And I think it's a good step forward for our board. You know, they said more, Mr. Cozart said several times he does not want us to have an adversarial relationship. That's not what the FOP is looking for. That's certainly not what we're looking for. And so, and I truly think that he meant that from his heart as well. So.
Thank you all for the report out. Do you think it may be productive to have the full board and the FOP meet?
I was going to say that, sorry. June 21st, if everyone's available. I had asked that they meet with the entire board, you know, and he said, let me check with their attorney's schedule. And so I got a text message about an hour or so after the meeting ended, and she's available on June 21st. So it would be prudent if every single board member can meet. We haven't decided where, but it would be prudent if we all could meet with the FOP. I think that's a good step.
Ms. Senator Jefferson, I will not be here on the 21st. There's a memorial for my mother-in-law who died last year in Iowa, so I will be there. But I will not be here on the 21st if that matters. I don't think it does, honestly.
Well, you've met with,
Well, I spoke with Mr. Cozart afterwards also, and what they intend, I don't think I need to be here for that. So
Okay.
I would try to keep that date of the 21st, even if others are not able to hear them.
Okay, thank you for. So that's a date that's actually, you know, we need to be able, everyone needs to be able to participate at that meeting.
Mr. Chairman, what did you think of the meeting?
You know, it's interesting, because we met with, I want to say 3 or 4 different groups. So I think from my perspective, I hear a familiar theme, and all those themes are one of, I think, wanting to restore and wanting policing and relational or relationships with the community to be better. I think I don't want to say what separates, it's not the right word. All the groups have a different way of how we should go about doing it, right? I think everybody wants a fair shake. I think everybody wants things to change because they know that they need them to change. How we go about that is, I think, where we start going into the weeds of how we get about there. But I think everybody is saying, from what I hear, it's the same thing. We want things to change. We know that it needs to change. But how can we do it in a way that is, I think, great for everyone? And I think that's where our role comes in from a standpoint as an oversight board, is to hear from all constituents, all people that are involved. And, you know, not that we're going to be able to please everyone. I think, though, it's important for us to hear from everyone. And I feel like we've done a really good job at doing that, but it's not going to be a one-hit thing either. So I enjoyed it. I think it was a great first step for us as a board, and also for them to be able to start building some bridges and not just defending the dam. So, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one, it's maybe 2 governance things. And partially this comes from our conversation earlier with the law department, but we'd had some talk about it, but I think the committee's going to begin doing some of the detailed drafting. The rules may need, probably some other things may need to be massaged, if you like, but do some drafting and including some procedures potentially that will precede the decision about the board authority. So we're going to begin that work so that we've got that done by the time the authority decision's made. The other thing, I think we should continue to meet in branch libraries around the city. We don't necessarily get a lot of participation, but it seems like a good idea. So I'll probably reach out to a library before the end of the week if my colleagues have any suggestions for location. But I think we'll continue to do that. It seems to work well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gippen. Mr. Gippen, before we bring up our guest, I want to circle back if possible, because I know a few people came in late. I want to circle back if there are any public comments. We want to allow that to happen this time. If you could state your name for us.
Yes, my name is Frank Henderson, and my wife is Dr. Henderson, and we filed a total of 5 complaints in the past 20 years with the APD. As Mr. Young stated, about the 18-minute mark of his with the meeting last week, that sometimes it takes something little, but to get the paper trail started on a particular officer, it might be one little thing, but it's a way to get big things started and it comes together. Well, a little thing happened to us in our home, and my wife was violated by the Akron PD by badge number 1400, Sergeant Bowman. He tried to violently force his way into our home after my wife had assured that he did not have permission to enter our home without a search warrant. And he was not successful in gaining entry into this, and he was not legally entitled to enter our home. He engaged in retaliatory behavior and has signed off on the false police report and such. Reading between the lines, we can guess that the use of force complaint will be rejected because it's being hung up by internal affairs. We need to know that there was no investigation, no one spoke to my wife or us or me in this particular incident, and it was immediately closed. And this is easy stuff for you guys. You have grown men that are violating boundaries and disrespecting legal codes. This wouldn't make a good true crime novel, but it sure helps with a serious problem with the Akron PD interacting with certain neighborhoods and how they retaliate against citizens with public assurance of their legal rights. You basically run the risk of being made fun of by members of the COPD. You have mental illness and you're abused by the APD. Last week, Mr. Young detailed several ways the APD sidestepped many forms of accountability for their officers. Clear picture emerges that no officer is likely to ever be held accountable, even in small ways, for their shitty behavior. How can you even, in good conscience, ask citizens to participate at this point? We got an out-of-town chief commanding a largely out-of-town group of young guys. They're not going to let us treat the neighborhood the way they want. We continue to watch this non-independent board as we hope to grow and see responsibilities in the way that doesn't minimize the participants of any category of the citizen. This is bigger than us, our complaints, and this is about what's right and what's wrong with the Akron PD. This is about a paper trail. This is about putting an immediate end to the APD's policing policies, from the small incidents to the executions. We need to speak up and be able to expect a response from the Citizens Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Is there anyone else? Okay. Can we circle back to, when everyone was coming in, we were on the community engagement. Can we circle back to that for 1 second? With the community engagement, I'm wondering, and this is something that was discussed yesterday evening, is there any way for the activities of the community engagement to reflect back to this Police Citizens Review Board and why we're here? For example, when you're having these activities in the community, they should somehow reflect this board's and this board's purpose, and maybe there's forms that can be given out to the public on, this is how you file a police report, okay? This is how you contact the board, whatever, but it can't just be, a festival without that. That's not why we're here, and I have no problem with the community engagement as long as they are engaging in the practice of bringing people to this board and getting people to understand how the police department works and how we're going to be working with the police department. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, I completely agree. So that's why I suggested if, you know, when I mentioned this activity that's going to be this weekend, this event, that if we had that information, here's the contact information. So I know we talked at that last meeting about having something to be able to hand out. So I really think it's about engaging, but it's also about using that as a way to educate and provide that outreach. And as Chairman Boyd said, just kind of get that data too, and how can we bring that back, and how does that drive the work of the board and the other subcommittees? So I absolutely agree.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had to say about that.
I really appreciate your perspective. As always, I think you seek to bring to the fruition the purpose of this board. And I think that it's not necessarily mutually exclusive. I think that the thing that we continue to be brought up to our attention is that there's just not a relationship, you know, or there's not trust. And so sometimes I think it can be hard to establish a formal relationship in a way that's like, hey, you want to talk about the police, you know? But I think we have to meet people where we're at and say, hey, you created this body to serve us. And we have to go, hey, you know, you created this for us, and I'm here to meet you where you're at. And maybe sometimes it may not be fully, hey, let's talk about police policy, but I don't want us to over-formalize our community engagement. I think one of the best parts about being a community is that we get to be in community together, and that community touches so many different facets of our life, and one of those facets just happen to be safety and trust. So I think we do, I guess, maybe need to create some type of, you know, maybe if nothing else, this is what you carry with you when you go to a meeting, whether or not that is just, you know, a pamphlet to say, here's everybody's contact information, here's like the charter, here's a QR code, like to how you can file a police complaint. But I think natural and authentic interactions, especially as we're just getting started, is only going to like increase our ability to connect with people. So those are just my perspective on it.
Yeah, thank you, and I agree with that. I'm just saying, can we incorporate more of our purpose in these community engagement activities that Ms. Lewis and this committee is putting on? We need to do that. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to have community engagement if we're not going to utilize it for the purpose of why we're here, as well as connecting with the community.
Ms. Castle, do you mind taking that back to our community engagement subcommittee?
I am happy to do so.
Thank you. All right, budget and finance. Mr. Costa? Oh, we're gonna. Yeah, but is budget and finance gonna take a long time? No.
Okay, so earlier I distributed to everybody a handout just with respect to the functions for the Budget and Finance Committee. It reflects pretty similar to what was read out at a meeting earlier. I believe it was our May 17th meeting. I have a printouts if anybody needs a copy as well too. Our Budget and Finance Committee approved this description of the functions subject to a couple of changes, which was in particular just specifying the ability to make recommendations as it respects to line items. And so I just wanted to, I'll give you hard copies as well.
Mr. Costa, I did print them out, and they're in the packet that everybody received earlier this evening. Absolutely. I think they're the second to last page.
Castle, you are on top of it as always. So I don't know if there needs to be any discussion, but I would like to, if there is none, then I would like for us to proceed to adopt these.
Can I get a motion?
Second.
Roll call, Anaskevich,
Yes.
Gippin,
Yes.
Richards,
Yes.
Castle,
Yes.
Costa. Boyd, yes. Thank you, Mr. Costa. Appreciate it. Now we'll have our guests. We'd like to introduce him, Mr. Gibbons.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I did have one more piece. As I was thinking about the, actually, I'll save this for new business. So.
Good evening, board members. It's good to see you all.
Good evening.
I am here to, I think, offer perspective. There has been some discussion concerning a resolution that is pending concerning this board's authority, and just had some discussion with some of the board governance members of the subcommittee. And I can offer, I think, publicly a perspective on the resolution. First and foremost, it's not a legal advisement, because this document is not a creation of law, if you will, and certainly there's been no legal opinion concerning the resolution. What the perspective I bring is that the resolution reflects a desire of this board to express itself about what it believes its authority to be, based upon the words on the page of the charter. And so from that perspective, there are, certainly those who feel it's important that that be a starting point for this board to have that consensus, if you will, at least a majority consensus. I don't know what the vote on the resolution would ultimately be, but it is that perspective that you would have, and that certainly as a resolution, should you alter your perspective, you could rescind or amend, well, actually rescind and then readopt another resolution about your perspectives on any number of topics. So I hope that that clarifies what this document represents, and that is certainly the perspective on the document. I don't know if there are any questions that I can address concerning what I've just said, and hopefully I'm pretty clear on it.
I'm not sure what you just said. To be honest, are you saying that we can move forward with the resolution as we see fit as a board?
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is that from my perspective, it's not for me to say what your resolution should or shouldn't say. It is your decision about what you believe is important to say, and that it is an expression of, at least if you pass it, it will be a majority's expression of how they feel about their authority.
Okay, and so with that expression, we can utilize, the criteria of the resolutions. We can utilize it within our decision making.
I think that that's going to be for you all to decide how much or whether and under what circumstances you do utilize it. I can't tell you that whatever thing you might do and how you may act in the future will not be challenged legally.
Sure.
Or that the fact that you say something makes it legally so, but it's a starting point, certainly. For example, if you feel that whatever perspective you take might still inform what procedures you may want in your rules and procedures, that consensus of this board might inform something that you might want to add as a procedure, which you may or may not ever use. I don't know, but it could help with helping define some things that you might want to see in your rules and procedures.
Perfect, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just so it's clear, it is the intention, certainly of the governance committee to use whichever decision is made on the resolution to guide the drafting of the rules and procedures. As the law director said, that's within our authority. But of course, she's leaving it to us to do that. But that is the intention.
So, Mr. Gippen, are we going to be revisiting this at our next meeting, or what are you looking to?
Mr. Chairman, I gather you're not here next week, is that right?
Yes, I am.
You are
Week
here.
after, not.
We wanted to have every member present.
Well, we're probably looking at more towards, man, the 21st. because
I will not
know
be here on the
He
21st.
won't be here.
It would probably the end of the month then, because I know Miss Reed won't be here the next 2 weeks.
The 28th, and we'd set a loose deadline of the 14th, but, for decisions, but circumstances are what they are. But I think as much as we can plan on every member being here, and that will allow ample time for further consideration. It may be that there's some discussion begins on it. I mean, it's on the floor. It's, there's no reason it can't be discussed, and maybe should be discussed with the idea that we are absolutely not voting on it that particular evening, but the discussion will go forward.
Okay.
So that people can begin to use the discussion to determine how they will in the end vote.
Okay. Anybody have any discussion tonight in regards of one or two of either one of those different options?
I believe I said, when Mr. Gippen first presented it, that I'm in favor of option B. I really like option B in the way it read.
Okay. All right. If there's no further discussions, we're going to move on with new business. Again, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you seriously.
Yep, absolutely. Any new business? I think we have one down here as far as the...
Yes. Are we still doing executive session? Okay, so, new business, the retreat. Mr. Peoples isn't here, but I think he's going to be watching. I'm speaking on his behalf. He and I spoke yesterday evening. Thank you, Beverly, for the information you forwarded to me, although I have not been able to contact him yet. His line is incessantly busy, so either he's getting a lot of business or or there's something, wrong with the phone line. So I'll keep trying. But what we need right now is summertime. People are taking vacations. What we need is for the board members to email Mr. Peoples several dates this summer between, July, August, June, July, August, that you'll be available for a weekend. It's not going to be the entire weekend, probably a Saturday, since a lot of people, attend church or something. A Saturday, one weekend this Saturday that everyone, that you're going to be available, and then we'll go from there before we contact the retreat organizer, and try and give several dates, not just one. Try to give at least two days this summer on a Saturday that you're available, and then we'll move forward from there.
Thank you for that, Ms. Anaskevich.
I did just want to share as new business. Last week we mentioned about having an online public comment form. So I did generate a Google form that we could link to the webpage if we desire. And I shared it with the board members via email for you guys to review. So maybe when we have additional board members here, we can move forward with that. But I just wanted you guys to have access to that so that we can get that ball rolling. So that was sent via email. And I think that's all I have as far as that goes.
Thank you so
Is that the
much.
one you sent today at 4:28?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Castle. I think it's going to be another way that our community can just access complaints, and it's a little bit more accessible. So I think the more pathways that we can give, the better for our community. So that's really good. Mr. Costa.
I had one piece. Over the long weekend, I was thinking, and I wanted to raise it to everyone's attention. So at this point, we've been meeting on a weekly basis, and I have been thinking whether or not, or I guess going back and forth, whether or not it's the most productive thing for us to be meeting on a weekly basis. It seems like a big scramble to try to meet every Wednesday and then have 3 to 4 subcommittee meetings in between that, and come back and for us to meet the additional Wednesday. And just based off of some of the discussions that I think that we're having during our meetings, some of them don't necessarily seem to be rooted in substance, but more so some ancillary things that we could take, address at a time. So I guess I just wanted to bring it forward to the board, whether or not we all, what our perspectives would be on maybe meeting on a bi-weekly basis, with taking advantage of the opportunity of the week that we have in between to focus on our governance meetings. I think governance, because that's the subcommittee where my time, attention, and focus is going to the most right now. But to really address some of our subcommittee issues, to give some support to our HR functions as we're trying to hire right now. And I just wanted to bring it forward, I guess, and hear everyone's thoughts, and whether or not, from a budget and finance perspective, you know, we are paying out, meeting on a weekly basis. And so, and that's fine given the lack of employees and staff that we have, and I think the sense of urgency that we've sought to step up in. But I just wanted to bring it forth and hear everyone's thoughts.
I have a thought. I think if we're going to reduce any meetings at all, they should be the subcommittee meetings. Maybe have those reduced to once every 2 weeks, because we still have issues that we need to resolve as a board on how we're going to start taking these complaints and how we're going to start managing the complaints. You know, we're still waiting to hear something back from the law department on, you know, that's our only barrier right now, before we can actually start as a board examining the complaints and start moving forward on them. So, in my opinion, if we're going to reduce, I agree that it's painstakingly, it's too much with all the meetings going on. But I think if we're going to reduce the amount of meetings, it should be the subcommittee meetings. I think the subcommittee meetings will probably do fine with meeting once every couple of weeks. But I don't think that our board meetings should be reduced to once every 2 weeks until we get our feet on the ground with how we're going to manage the complaints that we have, that Mr. Young has for us.
Mr. Costa, I appreciate you initiating this conversation. Ms. Anaskevich, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. Personally, I agree with Mr. Costa on this point. I really feel like as we're starting to meet with these subcommittees, we're starting to get a good foundation and really moving the work, and I would like for us to be able to dedicate more time there so that when we do come as the full board that we have more information and a more solid foundation so we can really use this time effective and efficiently and really move that work. So my preference would be subcommittees, you know, weekly or bi-weekly, and then the board meeting being bi-weekly.
I'm concerned about our process. I think we have to get our process in place first. I agree with that. But I think that goes back to our governance committee and our rules and procedures. So anything that we can do to step up that process, like I think we need procedures and rules about how we're going to look at complaints, what that looks like, how we're going to review them. So I don't want to get them until we have that done. And if that means we go to every other week board meeting so they can meet every week to work on that, that I just think that needs to happen before we even begin to think about reviewing complaints.
Mr. Chairman, I'm inclined to think, I guess this is agreeing with what you were saying, Denzel. I think for the time being that it's wise to schedule weekly meetings. We're going to set a new record here tonight, apparently, which is nice. But there is a lot of business that is going to be coming before the board. And we may have had just a little lull here, but you know, not just all the rules and the procedures that we're going to begin generating out of governance. And I don't view that as I mean, governance has been meeting every week and pretty typically for an hour or two. There's a lot to do, apart from the drafting that we may all be doing individually outside the meetings. But we're going to be hopefully bringing a stream of things to the board that are going to need, I would think, weekly activity to just deal with it. You know, and in addition, you know, I want to catch up with what your report was, Ms. Robinson, but, you know, we've got these really major issues about our staffing. And I'd hate to see that get slowed up by an artificial, oh, we're only meeting every other week. Hopefully we'll get those, you know, 2 folks hired, and then Mr. Young's contract is going to be, it's on us. We're just a few months away that we've got to make a decision about it. And that even assumes that that he won't make the decision for us. So I think there's a lot from HR that needs to happen. So I'm inclined to say plan to meet every week. If it appears there is no business or not enough business, a meeting can always be canceled. But I would schedule them. And then the subcommittees, to me, that's apples and oranges. I mean, the subcommittees have plenty to do, and they should be meeting as often as they need to meet for now. Hopefully all this will ease up in a few months, but I would favor leaving things as they are.
I agree again, and I'm just going to say this, and I appreciate your concerns and what you're saying, but we are not moving. We're moving at a snail's pace, in my opinion, with our purpose here and what we should be doing. And I don't think the issue is how many meetings we're having. I think the issue is what we aren't getting done at the meetings. I think that's what the issue is what we're not getting done. Not that we're having too many meetings, it's what we are and are not getting done. What we're not accomplishing or are accomplishing. I think that's the issue. And in my opinion, we haven't accomplished half of what we should be accomplishing. And it's not our fault. We've got some outside barriers that we're dealing with. I understand that. But until those barriers are removed, we need to meet every week so we can you know, stay on task.
Yeah.
If I may quickly, I was merely bringing forth the perspective that, from my view, we're not getting things done because we're all coming together to meet rather than breaking off as teams and working effectively on like the assigned projects and things that we've got done. And that by not meeting every week, we could then shift some resources and some time attention to the HR process and making sure that we get somebody hired and move that up to priority. But it seems like, the way that we're meeting now, people are comfortable with, I just want to be sensitive to, I guess, the realities or some of the practical challenges of us getting together on a weekly basis. It is certainly far different, I think, than any board I've ever I've worked on. And the bulk of the work of any board I've ever served on, which is, only been a 2 to 3, has happened in those subcommittee meetings. And so that was my thoughts in bringing the conversation forward. So, but again, I appreciate everybody's perspective.
If I could, Mr. Costa, I think that maybe the way to think of this, we're more like council than we are like a board that we've all been on that meets monthly. We're more like council, especially these days in terms of the workload, I think.
Just back to Mr. Gippin's point, so I'm kind of thinking of how we would have that middle ground. So if we did potentially go to the less frequent board meetings that were scheduled, when we had those instances where maybe the HR department committee was bringing forth a candidate to recommend hire, that's when we could call a special meeting. Is that correct? So if we had instances where we had an item that we needed to act quickly, then we could hold that special meeting to address that time-sensitive matter. So to me, that's kind of that third option there as well, just to take into consideration.
Yeah, I'm hearing everything that's being said, and I think, too, we do have to look at this as a board because that's what we are. I don't see us like city council. I see us as a board. And I think where the work gets done at is in the subcommittees. I do. That's our board. That's the structure of a board. A lot of the work gets done within the subcommittees. So I'm going to look at it in the flip side of what you said, Mr. Gippin. If we move to bi-weekly meetings, then we can always make a notice for a meeting that week if we need to have one, versus saying we're going to cancel the meeting. I think canceling the meeting, I don't like the look of canceling a meeting versus saying, hey man, we're going to have a meeting or we're going to schedule a meeting. Because I do think that because the turnaround is really quick, I don't know if we're giving our subcommittees enough time to do some of the work. And I think to your point, Ms. Anaskevich, there's a lot of work that needs to happen that should be happening within our subcommittees at the end of the day. And then when they come to the board, what we're doing is we're voting based on the work that's been done within the subcommittees. That's essentially what we're doing. And so I'm in favor of having bi-weekly meetings. I don't think we're running at a snail's pace. I actually think we're being cautious about how we move. And I think that's important because this is a very important task. And the last thing that we want to do is rush into some of these decisions without doing some of the stuff that we're doing outside of this convening area is gathering information. Gathering information so we can make the best possible decisions when it comes to our city as a whole. And I don't want to rush that. So I don't view it as a snail's pace as much as I do it as a very cautious pace. And sometimes sitting here causes us to move a little snailish, if you will, because we spend a lot of time, you know, essentially discussing and talk about things. I don't think that is bad. I think the one thing that that would hurt us is I like the fact that we're giving public comment weekly. I do enjoy that, and I do like that because I think that's good for our community to help, first of all, for them to allow this to be a process of not only, I don't want to say them venting because I don't think that's the right word, but for them hopefully being able to heal by acknowledging some of the hurt that they've went through when they filed these complaints. As Mr. Henderson did, you know, those are things that I think we have to utilize to go back and understand what happened here and why this ball was dropped. That's what we have to do.
Exactly, and that's not happening in the subcommittees. That's what I'm saying. Do we have one complaint before us as a board right now, as we sit here today, that we're examining?
No, Ms. Anaskevich, because we don't have our independent police auditor at this meeting.
No, we don't, but he does have complaints to give us, but there's a barrier out there with the law department that he explained to us twice that we need to find out what that barrier is so that we can actually deal with the complaints of the people who he has in front of him that he's ready to hand over to us. And I don't think it's prudent to go to every other meeting until we start handling, we as the board start handling citizen complaints. I'm not against the subcommittees. The
But
subcommittees
I don't
are
think we're
important.
handling those complaints, though, in this room.
Right, but meeting every other week, we don't know how that process is going to go in handling those complaints with meeting every other week.
But that's-
It doesn't make sense to me.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gipp and Ms. Casa, but this is where governance comes in, correct?
Well, the decision, that's the key decision, you know, as to our authority, and then how we will proceed with, you know, citizen complaints and other investigations, if you will, like use of force that we would have to vote to proceed with. But I think, I wasn't here last week, so I didn't hear Mr. Young, and maybe I should listen to the tape. But what I think the law director meant to be saying tonight was that it is for this board to determine its own authority and how it will proceed on such things like complaints and processing of complaints. So to the extent that you've come away from whatever was said last week, and I don't know what everybody else thought, but came away thinking that the law department is an obstacle to the handling of complaints by the board, I question that.
So,
I mean, you can question it, but that's what we were told. Now, I don't know
It may
the
not be
truth.
accurate is what I'm saying.
Well, it's about the redaction of the complainant's personal information. They're supposed to get back with us or with Mr. Young about how they're going to work the redaction of the complainant's personal information before they hand the complaints over to the board.
Okay. But anyway, well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, you know, I think this is largely for you to determine, and I would defer to your judgment about how often we should speak, or we should meet. It is not as easy to have a special meeting as you may think. It's got to be noticed, but the reality is that in deference to the media particularly, if they're not expecting a meeting, Ms. Huntsman you needn't say anything, but, knowing something about how news organizations work, they, and especially these days, they have to budget their staff well, who's going to be where when, so that springing a special meeting 24 hours before we have it is not going to be a good thing, nor for the public. So I think what we should expect is, if we go to that, is we will only be meeting every other week. There may be genuine, almost emergencies where we need to act immediately and cannot wait. But don't think that we can just plug in meetings, in between every other week. It's just, in practice, it's not really going to happen. It's going to be every other week, and we're just going to have, they're going to be very busy nights. If we in governance do our work, you're going to have a lot to chew on every 2 weeks. There's going to be a lot of stuff brought to you. And you may have to make decisions about it more quickly than you might want. I mean, not that anyone's going to force votes, but you're going to have less luxury of time to debate something like the authority resolution and then vote on it later. Just, again, it's fine, we'll work with it, understand how it's really going to work.
Yeah. Well, here's what I want to say. It's not my decision.
Exactly.
We'll make a motion, we'll get it seconded, and we'll vote. We're discussing now, but it's not solely my decision.
Thank you, that's what I was going to say.
We do have a quorum. So, Mr. Costa, did you have anything you want to add?
I wonder if the middle ground is us continuing the status quo until we address our question of authority via the resolution, because I think that is the one thing in particular that is causing a little bit more time for consideration, and that is creating, I think, an additional process. So I'm wondering in the middle ground if we keep things, because I do hear you with respect to the need for weekly public comment as things come up. So that's just my thought. I'm torn in the middle, honestly, and I think that it shows that the people that we're going to be here, no matter when we say that we're going to come. It's figuring out how we can most effectively address all of these competing factors that are going on, and I think in minutes and times, but I'll leave it at that.
So let's do this. If we're saying that by June the 28th, correct, Mr. Gippen, that we should have a resolution to the 2 resolutions, correct? Let's revisit and let's table this until then, because again, we'll have all of our board members there. That way we're getting everybody's comments and discussion. So let's revisit then. I think it goes in, Mr. Costa, to your point about finding the middle ground. Does that sound okay with everyone?
Yes. Just so if we can go to, bi-weekly meetings at some point, or even monthly meetings, help people light it. It's just a question of what needs to be done. But I'm very comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but it's way too early for that now, in my opinion, when we haven't even handled one complaint yet.
I don't think that we've actually decided that it is our actual factual role to be handling
Absolutely.
complaints. And I think last week there was a distinction as to Auditor Young's ability to hand over complaints and what form those need to be in. But I still think that there's a big question.
Review complaint, I'll put it that way. That's what we're supposed to do, and make recommendations.
Thank you.
That's what the charter says.
I just wanted to comment, there was a comment that was made that we are moving in a slower pace than what some people would hope, and I respect that we're taking this as a marathon and not a sprint, because I really want to make sure that we have a solid foundation under us, so that when we do move forward with the work, that we are taking the time to do our research, to get the feedback, to review the data and such, so that we do have that solid foundation. So I appreciate, I know we're all eager to hop in and start making those big changes, but I think every time that we meet and every little bit that we get, and when we connect with citizens and when we are educating ourselves through some of the training that we participated in. I do think that that is big work that is going to add up in the long run. So I appreciate everybody's efforts, and I know we're really eager, but I do appreciate building that strong foundation and taking our time to do so.
Thank you, Ms. Castle. Appreciate your comment.
If I could just,
Yes.
catch, our two members up who were horribly late tonight. It was 4 minutes, by the way, we got a lot done in 4 minutes.
We did. We went right down this agenda.
Our police auditor continues to battle health issues. He is trying to work on a regular basis, but he is ill. He's ill tonight. We had 5 interviews set up for the administrative free assistant, and 1 person showed up. We interviewed them. We had a fantastic interview. I was really impressed with him. Mr. Young is going to follow up with some questions that we all have for him tomorrow, and assuming those are answered well, we'll probably come forward with a recommendation. If not, we're going to open it up again to start over. The funnel is very frustrating about who shows up and who says they're interested and then doesn't. So that's where we're at with that.
Thank you,
I have a
Ms.
comment on that also.
Go ahead.
I spoke with Mr. Young last night, and he really does like the one young man. But he mentioned a couple things to me that I thought were a red flag that I told him he needs to ask him about. And if he's satisfied with, with his answers, then, you can move forward. But, and I'll talk to you afterwards about what my concerns were with those red flags.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Anything else regarding new business? All righty. Was there another public comment before we end? I didn't know if you, good. Ms. Castle, something I want to think, could you also, when you go into the Community Engagement Subcommittee, could you possibly begin a discussion with Ms. Lewis as far as kind of creating a survey? I'm really curious as far as our complaints, just asking questions in regard to that from an educational perspective, but also trying to receive and collect data from the community.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that we can filter through the community engagement subcommittees. We're going out to events, as well as something maybe we could put on the webpage too, so it was accessible that way. And then we also can do maybe a QR code or paper copy for if we have any involvement in the other subcommittee, so I'm happy to do so.
Thank you so much for that.
I'm sorry, I had one more update from Mr. Young. The request last week to sort complaints and use of force by zip code is proving to be fairly impossible due to the way that the plates are given, and this started in this neighborhood, it ended here, and the complaint is from here, but this situation happened there. He's continuing to try to work on it, but he's finding it incredibly difficult to get anything meaningful out of that request.
Do we have zip codes though?
Sometimes.
Okay. Even if it's just based on the ones that we have, I think any data is good. I mean, any zip code would be good as far as just trying to string together some data, but if not, I understand it. Okay.
Ms. Richardson,
Thank you.
do you know if the complaints are sorted by police district? I mean, that would tell us a lot, just
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, maybe it's
I would have
district.
to think they are,
Yeah.
but
Because we can always go back and through that find out where the districts are located. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, thank you.
I have one more comment about, with the QR codes, are you also going to have just like a written example? I was going to say, because everyone does, I know some younger people who aren't into the QR code thing, that's all.
Yeah, I figured we would have a paper copy, we'd have the QR code, and we
Okay.
also could have it linked to our section on the webpage.
Okay.
So we can make sure that we have different methods for accessibility.
Thank you.
Right. If there's no other new business, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Anaskevich,
Yes.
Gippon.
Yes.
Richards. Castle.
Yes.
Costa.
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.